Hello, welcome to Big 20, where we go behind the GM screen. My name is Dan. This week I am joined by
Mike.
And this is Eric.
What are we talking about this week, Eric?
We are talking about red herrings and misdirection. But before that, I need to fix the video, so keep talking.
Oh, okay. Well, so like so many things, I'm the new GM here, and I had a question. It's like, how do you pull this off? We have so many great examples in movies and books, and I always want to try to pull off some of these awesome events, awesome storytelling tricks that they do in these great movies that we watch. I want to know how to bring that into game. These are things that Mike has done to me, at me over the years. So I kind of wanted to pick you guys' brain as to how we go about this. Now, I will say, I started this, I posed this question, and I was already out of the gate. I was kind of wrong, even in the question that I was asking, because I started doing a little research, because I try to be prepared. And I keep seeing the term MacGuffin also. A lot of people are interchanging MacGuffin and red herring. And that's technically incorrect. A MacGuffin is something totally different than a red herring. And I guess I didn't really understand that before I posed the question. So I'll try not to dip into MacGuffin, but that's also in the back of my mind. Red herring. Okay. So high level overview, a red herring is something that has absolutely nothing to do with the story, that's there to mislead, misguide, just takes in a different direction, or to take focus away from something. Is that kind of fair? Like, we need to set the ground rules for what the hell we're even talking about.
Sounds like a good dictionary definition.
Okay, I believe I ripped that from Wikipedia, so it's close enough.
Yeah, I'm actually to go to what you were saying, though. I think that actually is talking about the MacGuffin. I mean, it's the object, right? It's you could interchange the word, Ark of the Covenant with basically anything, right?
Right.
And that's
right.
So that's not what the story is, but in a way,
the MacGuffin is the vehicle for the story that in it of itself is kind of irrelevant. It can be anything.
Right. But what I'm saying is the MacGuffin could be the red herring. If the object of the story is the story itself, it's the journey, it's it's dealing with these themes and the bad guys and things like that, and the goal is to get this MacGuffin, and the players are solely focused on the MacGuffin, then it takes away from the actual story itself.
I can see that. So how this also, like everything for me, there are scenes in movies, or there are movies that I want to recreate in game. I will share a story that's kind of the impetus for this. I'm in the movie theater, and I can't remember how old I am. I'm very young, and I'm right off the heels of one of my favorite movies, Pulp Fiction. It's like, oh, new Tarantino movie coming out about a heist. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching this movie and I'm in heist mode. And then all of a sudden, about 20 minutes into the movie, it turns into a fucking horror movie, and there's vampires, and Salma Hayek is hot as shit, and she's a vampire, and I want her to eat me, right? This is the event. I want to be able to pull off that absolute crazy misdirection and spring something like that. Like that kind of an event in a game would be amazing. My brain, of course, goes to Savage Worlds. I want to play a straight up modern day Savage Worlds game, and then pow, no. It's fucking vampires and shit, right? That's that was one of the greatest. Like, this is before I even understood what red herrings and MacGuffins and all of this shit is, because I'm sitting in the entire theater, because the marketing campaign for the movie was so well done. Nobody knew.
Well, yeah, it was coming.
Nobody. The whole theater was like, "What the fuck is going on? I want that to happen in game."
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I just recently watched From Dusk Till Dawn, like last week, and my daughter was watching it with us, and she was just, and it was like, well, what is this movie about? And the first thing my wife says is vampires. She completely, cut right to it. And so we're watching this movie, and my daughter goes, where are the vampires? This isn't making any sense to me. So looking at it from the other direction, it's like, well, this really, there was so much lead up to that it was like, well, wait a minute, what is this movie about? And like you said, it was fresh off the heels of Pulp Fiction, and you're like, oh, it's Tarantino, it's just going to be this, it's
another gangster movie.
It's be a gangster movie, right? It's going to be about these guys, trying to make it to Mexico, and that's exactly what that movie was about. And then it took a hard left turn as soon as they walked into the Titty Twister. And so
that's right, that was the name of it.
Titty Twister,
greatest strip club name ever.
So yeah, I mean, that the red herring, I guess, that one's more of a misdirection. That's more of a, don't look at my right, what my right hand's doing. It's the sleight of hand.
Well, in this, so the analogy that I draw, because one of the greatest red herrings is, again, it's another heist, is the heist in Psycho. The heist has nothing to do with the heist is the red herring that misdirects you to what actually is about to happen, which is this crazy murder mystery story that occurs. Again, it's these kind of moments that I think would be really, really fun to pull off for players.
Yeah. But
I think it would be hard.
You almost had kind of like what Dusk Till Dawn did. You almost have to go away from genre. And so if you're playing, because if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, that it's not necessarily a red herring. It's not a left turn. You're expecting that. You're expecting the monster to appear. So yeah, you would almost have to, like I said, go against genre, and you think we're playing superhero game, and no, we're really playing Jason Voorhees or something like that, and it's
perfect. See, and again, this is another, to me, one of the pluses of the generic system, because you can do that, right? In D&D, everybody kind of knows you're playing D&D. I mean, you can play with the themes a little bit, but in the end, we're playing D&D. But we play GURPS, we play Cypher, we play Savage Worlds, whatever is generic, and you can divert at a moment's notice and completely change gears. So that's what I want to talk about. Mike does this kind of thing all the time. Mike is also really good about the
He's so good at it. He gives himself red herring.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, see, maybe sometimes the greatest. So there's a wonderful line from the X-Files. I'm pretty sure it didn't originate there. It was like, a lie is most convinced between two truths, right? So the GM, you have to seed these things, right? Because it can become GM bullshittery, right? It can be, I've red herringed too much. We've had too much misdirection because I'm just stretching it out or whatever, or I'm a really shitty writer or whatever. But Mike doesn't do that. Mike ran an entire campaign based around the MacGuffin of the gold doubloon, the golden tollies. Golden tollies were a complete MacGuffin. They were irrelevant. They were the vehicle for the story, right? And then he would misdirect us into other directions with another faction who comes in to pull us away, right? To divert us from the main goal of the MacGuffins. Like, all these kind of things they're all swirling around at the same time. Storytelling tricks, I guess, is what you would say.
Gage wants to know how this affects player buy-in.
That is a damn good question.
Yeah, that actually, I was just thinking about that, and because when you're talking about especially red herrings, I think it's a misconception that it is a GM trick. It's certainly a GM tool, but it doesn't have to be something that the GM came up with. I mean, you could have red herrings that the players come up with themselves. Players assign value to whatever they assign value to.
They start scheming and they overthink. The
Right.
player
Or they-
overthink.
Right, or they think that maybe you emphasized something when you were talking about it, or maybe something that occurred to you at the last minute. It's like, oh, and the door is red, and they're like, oh, why is this door red? Why is this? Why is that? Oh, that red door has some significance, and really, it was just an innocuous detail that you just thought of on the spot, but they've assigned value to it. So
It's like again, because I draw everything from other media. It's like Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. You said red door. Yes, there's a red door in Twin Peaks that people theorize. What the hell is the meaning of this thing? There is no fucking meaning, right? There's the only meaning that exists is the one that I place onto it.
Right.
Or like Lost. Lost is full of red herrings.
Sure.
That it was an entire series based upon red herrings.
Right.
And I think, and this again kind of shows that you can do it too much, right? I think you could easily wear your players out, because again, we kind of want task resolution. We don't want to continually feel like, oh, haha, no, this wasn't it. Like that shit kind of gets old.
Right.
At least I think personally.
Well, yeah, if you dip into that well too many times, it ceases to have its shock value, and it just becomes trope or old hat. So
It's like the GM does not want us to finish this thing that we're doing, right?
Quit
And it's just another speed bump. It's just another hiccup.
Well, a lot of your video games have things like this. Think of your Fallouts, your Grand Theft Autos, things like that. You have jobs that you can do, or you have
The
missions,
side quest,
and all of a sudden you get some sort of weird side quest, and you can go down a rabbit hole and end up going, wait a minute, I forgot all about that other job.
Right.
And you
what
can
was
do
I
these
doing?
things.
Yeah, I do that all the time. That's one of the hard parts about these games. And if you don't focus on the main storyline, you get totally derailed, and this kills a game. I have stopped playing games because I got so far removed from the main plot line, the main quest. I was like, I can't get back into it.
Yep.
So I guess that's another fear that could happen in a tabletop game.
Sure,
You
and
get so far
absolutely
removed.
happens. Yeah.
People, again, like Gage is saying, the buy-in, like you are now completely uninvested in the main storyline that the GM may have put work into. So what do?
Right.
You kill your babies. That's a topic for another day.
Yeah, but
when to kill your darlings.
yeah, and and not only that, but also when to put your ego aside. What if the red herring is a better story than what you came up with?
Right. Well, so at that point, the red herring stops being the red herring. It has to become the thing because it's the better idea.
Right.
Yeah.
That's probably what happened to Lost.
You think?
Yeah, I think they wrote themselves in circles, and they just went wherever popular opinion went, or if fans started to figure out their plots, then they said, "Oh no, that's a red herring," and then they would write in a different direction.
Right, because they wanted it to be a surprise. Yeah, they just kind of they tried to bird dog the fans to try and oh no, we're one step ahead of you the whole time.
Right.
Fans are really smart.
Yeah. So, and this shows Lost is similar to a D&D game, whereas Dusk Till Dawn and books, those are self-contained. Those are done. Those are written. The beginning, the middle, and the end is all set in stone. So you can have your MacGuffins and you can have your red herrings pay off. Whereas with Lost and in a tabletop game in our RPG, it's not set in stone. We may have an idea of where we want it to go, but it's ever evolving. It's a living thing, especially with player input. So again, this is one of those. At the very beginning, it's a throwaway topic. It's one of those things like, oh yeah, it's easy. You just create misdirection, this simple little thing, but it's a lot larger than that. That's why I think it's kind of hard to pull off.
Yeah, it's kind of a staple in your investigative games. I used it actually, and it was completely unintentional in our game, The Stygian Fragment. I came up with the idea was that this particular person went to this one store to do this one thing, and so I came up with a receipt for, what he bought at the at this store. There was one thing on that entire receipt that meant anything. All the rest of it was just me thinking, okay, what would a guy who works as a laborer for a construction company and he was buying it on the company dime, what would he get? Okay, axe, this is 1920s, axe handles, a bag of beans, because they're like, hey, you need to buy the beans for lunch, so get a bag of dry beans. And he bought a bag of candy for himself on the company dime. And then there was one other thing.
We obsessed over that receipt for
forever.
Hours.
Well,
yes,
it was
hours
for
and
at
hours
least
and
a
hours.
week, because I left
Well,
that.
yes.
Yeah, I dropped those clues, and they were physical clues. I actually made up the receipt and everything like that. And I didn't say what it was one thing was of significance, and the fact that he went to this particular store, which would have led to the next clue. So, that was really all it was the address of the store. That's all really you needed. And I dropped those clues on the table, and the players took them up and then had an entire week to think about them. And I kept getting messages and emails and like,
I remember this.
Everybody was just obsessing over these things. And I'm like, really?
Well, because it ticked those check boxes. It is its value hidden in between non-value.
Right.
It was the truth was in something around lies, or in this case, was in clues of no value. And I think you may have just hit on something that might be kind of important for this: red herrings as cliffhangers for the end of the session, because it allows people. We're using player psychology against themselves. We're letting them run with it and let their own gears turn and see what they come up with.
Right.
In the downtime in between game. So maybe that's a checkbox.
Yeah, and they don't have your body language or you to say no, that's not important. Yeah, and they're gonna.
And then you take the best idea out of it, and then that becomes my idea now, and I'm brilliant for it. Right? It's all about selling this brilliance.
That's right. You can, as a game master, it is your job to have the players believe you are brilliant because you are using their ideas.
Right. Yes. The story of the douchebag GMs. That's us.
Yeah, and like I said, sometimes you can let the player come up with their own red herrings and come up with their own reasons why they want to do things. Some of the problems with that is how frequently do you play? And how big is your group? Because these two things can affect things greatly. If you're playing every 2 weeks, sometimes people have a tendency to forget what is not always in their face. So
yeah,
you throw them a red herring at the end of a game, and then 2 weeks later you come back to it. Either they've completely obsessed over it, or they think that was the focus.
The red herring is the only thing that maybe stood out and the only thing people remember. So that's where you pick up where you leave off, and maybe you leave off or you pick up at the red herring. So I mean, I could see that. So I guess here's the big question: why to do it in the first place? Like, what are the scenarios that would require the need for a GM to throw in a red herring? Is it purely to disguise the bad guy? Is it just to milk out a game session because maybe I'm not prepared? Like, why are we doing this in the first place?
Maybe the red herring is the story, and I will tell you the absolute greatest red herring story ever.
Okay,
The
please tell me it's something I did.
Usual Suspects.
Oh, see.
Yeah.
And I almost didn't want to bring this up because it is the greatest. The Usual Suspects is the other moment that I wanted to capture. I actually hinted toward this for our next actual play whenever I was talking about playing the NPC that is the villain in plain sight. To me, the villain in plain sight is one of the greatest, like, most satisfying things that you could ever pull off in a game.
Yeah.
Mike has done this. Where you had the acting, it was the member of the party who was actually had been wronged by the party many years before, and he injected himself back into the party in disguise, and he adventured with them for a long time.
Yep.
And then, in true Mike Bridges fashion, the ultimate long play. How many years did this arc take place? I mean, roughly.
It can't be too long.
You don't think? Because
No.
when you hear other people tell the story, again, this is the
It
legend.
probably
Right?
seemed like it was long. But
Right. Okay, so but probably in game terms, in real life game session terms, it was more than a year, was it not?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah.
That's a long play for, I think, modern games. A lot of people don't play that long, especially one single campaign throughout. So if you can hide the villain in plain sight, all the while everything else is a misdirection by this particular villain for whatever their end is. If you could pull that off in tabletop, that's amazing. Mike has done it. That's why Mike is amazing.
Mike is doing it.
Oh, wait, what?
Always misdirecting.
Well,
Yeah. Okay, so
it
why
might
are
be
you doing
wrong to say that all misdirections are red herrings, though. I mean, some misdirections can be part of the plot. A red herring might be that you think someone's the villain, and I want you to think that's the villain. You pursue that while there's a real villain going on. But then that guy, didn't have anything with the plot. So I guess that's it's confusing.
Yeah, Gage brings up a good point. Is when do you do it so it's not pissing people off? I always bring up the GM dirty pool, right? Because we've all had these games. We've had con games. We've had bad games in shops where GMs do this, right? Bad GM, because when we know this happens, the GM feels it's the GM versus the player, right? And this is one of those bad GM tools, so they can try to get over on the players when the players have technically outsmarted them, right? This, to me as a GM, I want my players to outsmart my villain, because that is the nature of the villain story, right? If the heroes don't outsmart the villain, the heroes probably do not overcome the villain, and then then we have a completely different story going on, right? So a
good misdirection / red herring plot, though, can extend your story. Because if you're playing the story where absolutely Darth Vader's your villain, and you can go after him on encounter 1 and kill Darth Vader, it's a very short storyline.
Yes.
Sometimes you gotta hide that villain. If he's not as powerful as Darth Vader, let's say, you gotta hide that villain for a while before you bring him out.
Yep.
Because then when you do discover who he is, you can either outsmart him or beat him up easily.
Yep.
In most role-playing games.
Yeah, that's the nature of the Emperor, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Emperor is this crusty old man, and Darth Vader is his bully boy. And you had to get, for the first whole movie, you don't see the Emperor, and all you see the Emperor in the second movie is just his face. So, there is a master behind, holding the leash of Vader, but you really don't encounter him until the third story, the epic ending. And
now, I don't think the Emperor was a misdirection in that story necessarily, but it's just what I mean is, if I'm going to have a villain who's pulling some strings, behind there, sometimes outsmarting him is just beating his minions along the way, really.
I mean, I have no problem. You gotta fight. You gotta fight to get to the end.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the nature. Especially that's the nature of role playing games. D&D. We fight in some way, metaphorically or actually. We fight to get to the end. And if your big bad guy is accessible from the very beginning, either he's not a very good bad guy, or he isn't the real bad guy, and he's just a minion of a yet bigger bad guy. And again, that's one of those misdirection tricks that you can only pull off for so long. You can only move the final boss so far down the road before your players lose investment, right? Before this becomes boring and it's not the real guy, so who cares? There's no value in this fight because we know it's not the real thing. You have to sell it as the real thing.
You can definitely overdo this and to where they expect you to do it all the time, like you get to be M. Night Shyamalan,
Right.
and so they expect everything to be a misdirection or a
Twist.
a twist of some kind. That's why I don't, at least consciously, I don't try to red herring too much these days, so that when I do pull it off, it's more of a surprise now because I had got that reputation.
Yes. Yeah, well, see, again, we what's Eric? You've said this. You know the actual quote is that a person is the sum of the 5 people they are around the most. Something I'm close to that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, and this goes for games too. I as GM am the sum of the GMs who I have played with. I have played under. Right.
Sure.
So, and there are shoes to fill. There are things that you can and can't do based upon. Like to pull off a villain in sight, to pull off the red herring I'm always comparing myself to the things that Mike does, right? So, and there are other things like anytime you design a combat, you are comparing yourself to Eric, right? Because these are what
Right.
GMs are known for. I had an epically long campaign whenever I ran a shop, and in the back of my mind, every game that I run that I want to be big and epic is always modeled after what that GM did, because these are the things that I know. These are the things that have influenced me. So to pull off a red herring, I'm always in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what would Mike do? Right? And you have to be really, really careful, because if I do that, Jason, player in our group, he's going to sniff that out. He's like, this feels like Mike, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do I pull off a red herring without being Mike?
Yeah.
How do I identify that? That's again, how to become your own GM, right?
So I'm starting to lean towards misdirections being intentional, and for me, a red herring being unintentional. So I don't think I would throw out a whole lot of red herrings on purpose. I'm more the type that if someone like Jason or whoever becomes obsessed with that door you were talking about, or that blank piece of the graph paper, when you're mapping out a dungeon, there's, you didn't use up this side of the graph paper. I'm going to go over there. We need to explore that. It's nothing, but I'm going to let you waste time figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fembrick brings up something really good. So I am the sum of the GMs I've played with. And he brings up podcasts, and I'll extend that out to blogs and GM advice online.
Sure.
That is where I think I have to pull more from, because I know we all run in different internet circles, right? Like I visit the different blogs than Mike or Eric or even my players, right? And luckily we know the average player doesn't devote a whole lot of time to GM blogs. So this is good. This is where we can cherry pick stuff, and we can sell online information as our own and sell that, God, I'm brilliant, to my players, right? Because we need that, because I need that because I'm have low self-esteem. I need this, right? I need to be propped up. I need my players to think that this guy is as good as it gets, right? Not more importantly, because I'm all they have. So I want them to enjoy it.
Right. And I would include things like actual play podcasts too, to that.
Sure. Only the ones we do, because the rest are fucking garbage. Sorry. I'll put my stamp on that.
There was
inflammatory statement.
There was a game that I played in where we had a red herring, and it was all about it was all focused around these coins, which an NPC assessed value to as almost like just a token of, okay, there needs to be an exchange, and I will give you information based on how many of these coins that you have. And then we were like, oh yeah, these coins are really like, they're like magic beans, what are they? And, after the story started to progress and it got to a certain point and we're starting to get information from outside sources going, he just literally just like pressed those himself. They're not really worth anything. He just traded them to the savages and assessed value to them, and they just took them. So you putting value on them really is kind of silly. And so those were total red herrings, because not only was the game master selling them from the NPC, but he also had physical tokens that he was like, here, I'll give you 3 of these, and like handed them to you in your hand, and you're like, oh, well, these must be important because, we're using actual like game coins for this stuff, and so
Yep.
to have that,
Man, that's the long play. I'm putting real money in to sell this fake thing.
right, exactly.
We all do it.
Well, what it is you have as gamers, you go out and you buy bullshit that you don't need, and then you go, man, I really need to use this to justify actually buying it. So, okay, I think I'll use it for this. I'm fairly certain that's exactly what happened. But
this is how the entire game coin business got started, I believe.
Yeah. Everybody thinks how cool it would be to have open up an actual chest and have all of these coins in there, but that's a lot of friggin' money, and for one effect, right?
Yes, yes. You're going to tell yourself it doesn't get old. It gets old, but I've spent way too much money on this. I have to get at least a year's worth of gags out of it.
Right, exactly.
Chocolate coins.
Chocolate. Oh,
There
see, again.
Mike,
with
that's
the
brilliant,
benchmark.
by the way, because
boy.
that's not only do you get to use them as physical tokens, people eat them, and then they don't have them anymore, and they're like, I really wish I had more.
Gluttonous bastards. And of course, I'll tangent just because it's a funny story. So what was this? Two Christmases ago at our gamer Christmas exchange, Mike got us all chocolate chocolate dice. I believe everyone but me still has theirs. Mine were gone immediately. I ate them immediately.
Just right there at the table.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right there at the table. Like I think everybody else hadn't opened theirs yet, and mine were already gone.
Was this the Christmas gift exchange where I got you the pillow?
Yes, my which Winchester brother was it?
It was
I don't
both
remember.
the Winchester brothers.
Was it?
And
Okay.
They were laying ass to mouth, and
yes, that's right. Yes, they were 69 position.
They were in 69
side by
position,
side,
yeah.
of course.
Side by side, covered with very thin sheets.
That would be they were Pisces together.
There you go.
I think
There
would be
you
a
go.
better.
Ass to mouth is a little, that's too graphic.
That's a little bit too graphic. It was essentially what most people call a waifu pillow, but this was the Winchester brothers.
Yes.
Loved bringing that one home to the wife.
Yeah.
She's like, what do you people do? Like, it's really
The best
hard
pillow.
to explain. Yes, it sits right next to my Winchester, my 2 T-shirts of the Winchester brothers. So
Yep.
it's wonderful.
Yep.
Red. See, this is a red herring, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you throw out the Winchesters and
Yes.
fan.
One day I'll get a good gift that's not Winchester
Well,
brothers.
you just gotta. What you need is me not drawing your freaking name every
Well,
year.
this is true. It's worth it though. See, because and as always the case, I have to mention this at least once per show. For me, the story isn't the story in the game; it's the story of the game. I could care less, for the most part, as a player and as a GM, the big plot of the evil villain and the hero arc. It's the stories of the events that are created at the table. Those are the things. Like, I've spent a lot of time in shops, running shops, going to them over the years. Spent time at cons, and I observe us. We never, hardly ever, talk about plot lines. We don't reminisce about story arcs. We talk about events. We talk about big roles. We talk about strange things that happen at the table because of the game, but aren't necessarily of the game.
So what you're saying is the plot is a red herring.
I think for a lot of games. Now, I'm sure that there are story gamer groups out there that are very invested in the collaborative storytelling process, and that's fun. But that's a different thing. And I still wonder, unless you're like narrowing in and putting this down on paper. I was like, I wonder how many people are talking about those shared story experiences down the line,
Right.
or if they're talking about strange things that happened while they were doing. Again, I'm different in that. Oh my God, they brought up
Yep.
Franco and Shaq.
They're
It's
they're
time
trolling
to
Dan.
bring out the band hammer. Sorry, Boshi.
I didn't
You're
even hear
muted.
what you said.
No, she was defending it.
Oh, okay, good.
No,
I see.
It's Gage who says you're Franco.
Yeah, no.
Well, and I think that there's a difference there because traditionally we play with our friends and it's more about the social aspect of it,
Yes.
and it's the camaraderie than it is the actual game itself. Now, we've played in some great stories, no doubt, but we've been doing it long enough where the stories start to run together and it's the individual moments that stand out. Now there are people who run at cons, and right there, I mean, when you play a con game, if I play in a con game, I remember the story way more than I remember the interactions, unless somebody does something really kind of silly or over the top, and then
Sure.
you're just like, ugh, jeez, you know.
For both good and bad. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, and you know, so you're focusing mostly on the story. Or maybe you're trying to get a feel for the game itself. I mean, how many times have we gone to a con and played a game that we've never played before, and we walk away from it either A, going, this is a game that I want to get, or this is something I really like, and it could be just because the game master was good,
Sure.
or the story was good, but we associate that with the game itself. Or we go back and go, oh, man, I thought I wanted to get that game, but I don't want to touch it, So I think,
Oh man, I'm sure game designers love to hear that.
sure, absolutely.
So I want to steer it back a little bit, back to red herrings. One of the things I would like to pull off would be the magic item red herring, because I think one of the reasons we play these games, especially D&D, is you play it for the items. You play it for the interesting gear, the quirky things, the cursed items, magic items.
Yeah.
Like I want to merge these two things. I kind of like the idea that your red herring is a magic item. Maybe it's a vastly powerful magic item that people would kill for, but in the end, it was a distraction. It isn't necessarily needed. It's a cool thing because people like to get cool things, and we want cool magic items. But how would we hide that? And I don't know how we would pull that off.
Well, I think,
Is there a particular item you think that would make like a really good red herring, Mike?
The false prophecy.
Okay.
This item's you're the chosen one, or this item's the only thing that can slay so and so, and it's not.
Well,
It's
Excalibur.
something else.
The entire story of Camelot and Excalibur and the Grail, they're both red herrings.
No, they're
Right?
both MacGuffins.
Oh, you're right. Damn it. See, this is what happens.
And
They're both MacGuffins.
What you're saying is possibly the magic item could be both a MacGuffin and a red herring. You go all the way through this quest to get to this thing that you think is going to stop Sauron. It's gonna stop the big bad guy. You get there and it's vendor trash, and you're like, well, son of a bitch. It was a red herring this whole time, but it got us through the grind.
I have to answer Pablo's question in chat because it is a
Pablo's
good
got
question. The difference between DM and GM is purely branding. DM is a brand term for Dungeons and Dragons. It's Dungeon Master. Every other game is a Game Master. It's just branding.
Right.
It's why it's, to their credit, it's why when you go to Twitch, we're in the D&D channel, even though not everybody's playing D&D. It's just good branding.
Right.
Damn you, Wizards of the Coast.
Yep. It's like the difference between umpire and referee. I mean, there really is no difference. It's just a title.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so you could totally do an entire campaign, or at least an adventure, based on a MacGuffin that is, you're being told, is the savior. This, like you said, Mike, the false prophecy. I need to get this particular, magic bird's feather to write the spell that will undo this bad stuff, or rewrite time, or whatever it is. And you go all the way through it, and it's just a bird. It's not anything really special at all. You pull back the curtain and the wizard is actually some schmuck.
I just thought of a good red herring. Maybe I'm confusing the two. Fifth Element. She was the red herring, right? Because the great weapon was her.
Oh, right.
You know what I'm saying? So maybe I don't know how you would pull that off, though, especially if it was a player. This seems like the kind of thing you can only really do with an NPC, though. Maybe.
Well, you would have to have a player like our friend Aaron, who's willing to be a plot device. somebody you could say to.
Yeah, he's a tool, all right.
Oh man, it's unfortunate he's not in
Zing,
check.
zing.
Zing.
But yeah, it's one of those, and you don't get a whole lot of those. And so when you do get them, it's like the unicorn, right? You have to possess it, and so it's like, okay, I know running a game, I could trust Aaron with particular details of the plot. I could do this with Mike too. Particular details of the plot that I know he's not going to reveal, and I can assign a more, plot twist element to his character arc. Only if they're willing, of course, but it's one of those things where it's like, hey dude, I really need you to do this one thing when it comes time. Okay. And so then, they could be the villain hiding in plain sight, or the traitor, or, the Leroy Jenkins at the absolute most inopportune time, that kind of thing.
I think if you're going to go the red herring route, that implies you're also going to give the players the actual payoff.
Right.
Because, you definitely would, you don't want to piss off players, for sure.
So I guess if we're talking about a misdirection is intentional, and a red herring is unintentional and potentially has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah. Well,
right?
some red herrings, they can be intentional. You just have to be really good about it, because
they're not always going to bite.
Yeah. You could throw it out there and they're just not going to bite on it.
Yeah. So unintentional ones, I think, are the best.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so, and you've got to be able to recognize when that is, like you said, Dan, you got to be flexible. You've got to be able to be willing to kill some of your babies. If you're, your entire plan for the night was for the players to get to this certain area to meet this particular NPC, but they get a wild hair up their ass and decide to go completely into left field and start looking into this other thing. Now, you could do a couple of things. You could let them do their thing and try and steer them back towards where you want them to be. You could move your NPC to where they're going, or you could just railroad them and say, that's going nowhere, plot vacuum, come back and right the ship. And if you do that third option, you're completely removing any kind of immersion that they've built, and you're starting back at zero.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's why you use there are certain things that tabletop games are good at, right? And that the fact that the end isn't necessarily set in stone, it's not a novel, it isn't written. I think you have to really use that to your advantage in this situation. So yeah, you can always move the end goal to go in line kind of in the direction that the players are going. You can be fluid, you can move things. And like Mike always says, he'll say, Mike's classic term is saving it, right? How often do we not get to a thing? You keep your notes, you save it, and you use it at a later time whenever you can weave it in.
Yeah,
right?
That was always nice when I knew I would get around to using what I'm going to save. These days, it's not as easy to save it.
Well, the amount of game that we get to do is a lot less now.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, that's why. That's why I think we have to be really, really specific and really choosy about the things that we do, the particular red herrings that we throw in, because if it's not going to serve the plot, if it's not going to advance the plot, it needs to create one of those events that I'm talking about that creates a memory, right? Or if it's completely player driven, then they're having fun, right? These are the only things that, like, I think very often, and I see this whenever you watch online games or you read blogs that are talking about the game in a theoretical sense, or you're playing the game for mass consumption, for as entertainment. We tend to forget the reason we play this. You play a game because you're supposed to have fun, right? It's supposed to be fun, or it's a game that is intended to be educational, right? These two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can have fun and be educational, or you're trying to work through a particular problem. Like that's why you do role playing in like corporate HR bullshit, right? So these are the reasons why we do it. And I think sometimes that gets lost, right? So a red herring, if it's creating fun for your players, it doesn't matter if your end goal has been put off by another week or two, right?
Right.
If the players are having fun, let them run with it. And maybe we can end around and bring our goal back into what the players are doing.
There's
Sacrilege, Dan. He says, "Oh no."
there are some games we traditionally talk about your D&D, Shadowrun, things like that, which sometimes, I mean, especially with something like Shadowrun, you have a very goal-oriented thing. There are some games that include a whole lot more player agency where they can affect the plot a lot more or affect, what's going on. All they have to do is spend a resource, let's say it's a plot point or whatever it is, and say, there's a door here. Dungeon World's good for that. There's a door here. Okay. There's a door here. And, those games, if you ever want to have that, the proverbial asshole pucker moment where you don't know what is going to happen as a game master, play a game like that where, you don't literally know what's going to happen after the characters go through that door. And now instead of having this control over the story, you're kind of out there, and the players are starting to take a little bit more control over the things around. And
one of my favorite things in one of my favorite game being Mutants and Masterminds, is you can use a hero point for the wonderful, completely broad and broken edit scene ability. It's written into the core mechanics of this very crunchy game. You have this super storyteller driven concept of edit scene, right? So good. But as a GM, I would be terrified to have somebody like me at the table who would edit scene and completely fuck everything up.
Right. I mean, every player has their own style, but you have players like you who would be like, I think it would be a lot cooler if this happened. And then as a game master, you're like, well, okay, I totally wasn't expecting that. So do I veto that, or do we just go with it? Because it looks like the group's having fun with it. Then you have another part of that would be someone who is doing it because they want to derail the game, or they want to do their personal thing. And everybody else is sitting there going, really? Come on. Let's get back to what we were actually doing. No, I spent my resource. I get to do what I want to do. So I mean, that's in that the player is creating a red herring and is completely distracting the group. And that's when, as a game master, you got to keep them on task and go, you know what, maybe you do this, but then this happens or something like that.
I'd like to point out to Brandy, it's only dangerous to sit on my right because I only stab things that are on my right. But this also, when a GM is animated, I think I found I had the greatest level of success whenever I GM'd standing up, because not only did I have more energy, it allowed me to be expressive, and when you're physically expressive, you can draw attention to things you want. So in this case, we could draw attention to the things that we want to place value on that are a misdirection. Right. Anything that draws, like, it's like magicians and sleight of hand. It's like, it's all about misdirection. Like, I have to get your attention over here so you don't see the thing that's actually important over here. That's going on. In this case, the villain doing whatever, or pulling, the art of GMing is the art of massaging your players in the direction you want them to go, while still letting them do whatever they want to do, because you don't want to squash people, right?
It's the illusion,
unless that's your goal, is to crush their dreams, and that's fun too.
It can be.
Yeah. No, it's always fun. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I'm a firm. I don't do it as much as I used to, and I probably should, especially with the size of groups that I run for. But yeah, standing up. I actually have said this more than once. It's I like to GM like Bruce Dickinson acts on stage.
Oh yeah,
you ever watch Bruce Dickinson on stage? You know
Bruce Dickinson's line was, whether you played a 5 or you played a 5,000, you project the same.
Right.
Right.
You got to reach that person at the back.
Yeah, you have to reach the person in the very back. So in this case, when you're GMing, you kind of have to be GMing to the most, I think sometimes the most uninvolved, to bring them into the fold. I guess that would be the Bruce Dickinson analogy.
Right. And just being energetic and being excited about what you're doing.
We know excitement. These things are infectious, right?
Sure.
So, yeah.
So I mean, and if you as players get the most focus on on what you're saying, they put a lot of weight on what the game master says. So if you put a lot of emphasis and you're all and this person's doing this and this person's doing that, that's who they're focusing on. They think those people are important. So if you can contain your enthusiasm enough, because if you got a really that's one of my biggest problems. If I got a really kick-ass bad guy,
you're anxious to use it.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to show this dude off.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's better, like Mike says, and you save it. There's two schools of thought, I think, when it comes to that. There's the saving it model, which is the delayed gratification. It's the all of a sudden it all comes at you at once. And then there's the other side of that coin, which is use your cool stuff now, because you may not have a chance to use it later.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of a tweet. The Dungeon Bastard tweet. This has been years and years ago. But one thing he tweeted out that I really took to heart was, use your awesome stuff because you're going to come up with more. So just use it. And, maybe it will lead to more awesome things, but you're going to have more awesome ideas. So I don't think there's a wrong way to approach it. Like if you're really anxious about something, I think you should probably use it.
Yep.
So I like the idea. Mike is really good about props.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes.
I think that's the best way to sell a red herring or a misdirection. If my GM took the time to draw this map, if my GM took the time to write up these bounties, or these marks on our hand or whatever, or he brought these particular coins that he actually spent money on, that's going to sell your red herring.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that's totally believable. That's the lie hidden between truths. Because in this case, the truth is money and time.
Never spends money.
Right. Yeah. If
Mike spent money on this, oh my God, it must be important.
Surely he wouldn't do this just to distract us.
Yeah.
Little do we know he would.
Right.
Well, my last major campaign, I didn't do that.
You didn't do any.
I had maps and pirate letters and bottles and actual potion vials. I had all these hands.
Those are disgusting, by the way.
None of it was
absolutely
That's
disgusting.
right. You actually had to drink them. You had to LARP that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. We drank them.
None of that was distraction. That was all on the level.
But see, you can slip a red herring into that though. If you're doing that and it's like, oh yeah, we're doing this and we got this and we got that, and everything has a game or story value, and then you slip something in there that doesn't, that's a red herring.
They will never know.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
GM Dirty Pool. So satisfying. It's fun.
Yep. That's right. Swimming in a GM Dirty Pool.
All I know is that I think that day we decided to swear off drinking any of Mike's potions ever again.
Weren't they like the Harry Potter beans with like boogers and?
No, that was another day. That's Randy bought those just for fun. I got spoiled milk. It was great. No, Mike. After the fact, Mike is telling us what the ingredients were, and I can't remember which one it was. But I'm like, yeah, that needs to be refrigerated, and it can really go bad. And Mike says, oh yeah, this has been in my car for a week. Oh great, you're literally poisoning us. Thanks.
Right. Wow.
We're going to gain from the emergency room now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
plot point. Gage brings up plot point campaigns. This is, I think this is one of those.
Of course he did.
Yes. Well, Savage Worlds. I mean, it doesn't get any better. So I didn't even think in terms of the plot point style. But I think you would almost have to have red herrings and misdirections, because the nature of the plot point campaign is it's like a fill in the blank style game. Like, these are the big events, and it's kind of up to you and your players to fill the interim. So I would almost think it would be beneficial for those style games that like to come with a sidebar of potential red herrings.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, Savage Worlds, Pinnacle Press is really good about, like, I love their one shots, the plot point campaigns that are broken up into one sheets. So maybe your red herring is the mini game, the adventure within the adventure,
right?
That gets you through the night.
Sure. I mean, yeah, that's hell. If you're looking at it that way, any off night, where maybe you don't have everybody show up, or something like that, and all you're doing is tooling around town. I mean, that could all be red herring. It could all be important, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could just be red herrings. Could be opportunities for character development, and I'm not talking about just XP. I'm talking about personalities and
sure. These are the opportunities to figure out who your character is,
right?
Because we go into characters. At least I do as a player. You go into a character with an idea, but that changes. Right. That can change over time, or you decide to go through a particular arc for your character, and these are the events. You don't get to go through that in dungeon A,
right?
Encounter B5, right? It's the other places where that kind of develops.
Right. All right. Well, I think we're getting pretty close to time.
All right. Red herrings.
They're
not easy.
No,
they're not.
Nope. So we will be back again next Wednesday. So
same bat time, same bat channel.
Exactly right.
As always, thank everyone who joined us very much. Thank you for the input.
Right.
It is greatly appreciated.
Yep. And you can always follow us on Twitter, or we're on Facebook too. So if you want to give us some thoughts on what what you think of red herrings. Maybe we forgot some stuff. Maybe we got it all wrong.
If you can, feel free, anyone who wants to write up a Savage Worlds from dusk till dawn red herring payoff,
there you go.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Join us on Twitter, Discord, Facebook, everywhere where finer podcasts are sold.
That's right. We're there somewhere.
Yes, we can be found. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Brandy, for manhandling chat as always. It is greatly appreciated.
Pablo.
Yes, Pablo, we hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure this is all amazing content for you that you can go and tell all your friends about.
That's right. All right. See you later.
Thank you all.